Ronald used to look at Rosa like she was the only light in a world full of shadows. And Rosa, she believed in him more than she believed in God some days. They weren't perfect. No couple really is. But the way they held each other in silence said more than all the loud promises people throw around these days. Ronald had dreams, big ones. He wanted to open his own recording studio, put real music back into the world. Rosa was his backbone, his biggest fan. Even when the world treated his dreams like a joke, they met in college, both broke but full of fire. Ronald was the guy who turned heads without trying, quiet but magnetic. Rosa was the girl who made eye contact and didn't look away, the one who asked real questions and waited for real answers. They clicked over late-night study sessions and cheap coffee. 4 years turned into 6, and still they stayed. But time has a funny way of testing people. And love starts to change shape when life starts to push. It started small. Ronald got busy chasing a deal with Bryant, his old friend who now ran with industry types, and carried himself like he owned every room he walked into. Rosa noticed the shift. Before Ronald did, late replies, missed dinners, promises made and forgotten. But she didn't say much. She knew his dreams mattered, and she wanted to believe in the both of them. Then came Ida. She worked with Bryant, and everything about her screamed polished and perfect. Long legs, red lips, confidence that could burn holes in walls. Rosa met her once at a label dinner. Ida smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. The kind of smile a woman gives when she's already laid claim to what you thought was yours. Rosa didn't accuse Ronald, not at first. She just watched him get dressed with more care, watched the way he spoke softer on the phone when he thought she wasn't listening, watched how his eyes drifted when he thought she wasn't looking. Love makes fools of us all, and Rosa had been the proudest fool of them all. One night, she waited up for him. It was past 2 when the door finally creaked open. He looked tired, but not sorry, not like someone who just spent the night chasing a future for both of them. "You smell like her," Rosa said quietly, not needing to raise her voice. Ronald froze, hands still on the doorknob. She wasn't crying. She was past that. Her voice didn't shake. It was steady, clear. "You don't even try to hide it anymore." He didn't lie. That was the worst part. No long explanation. No fight. Just silence and the heavy air of things unspoken. Ronald sat down across from her, hands clenched. "It just happened," he said finally. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." But it did. Yes, she didn't scream, didn't throw anything. That's not how heartbreak really works. It's slow. It's a quiet breaking. A whisper inside that says, "You're not enough anymore," and still, she didn't leave. Not that night, not the next week. They lived like strangers in a house filled with memories. She cooked less, laughed less, stopped asking where he was going. Ronald thought maybe things would just settle, but love doesn't survive on silence. It dies in it. The day she met James was unplanned. He was a friend of a friend, warm and loud and nothing like Ronald. He didn't know her history, didn't carry that weight in his eyes. With him, Rosa laughed again. She felt seen again. Not compared, not tolerated, loved. It started with coffee, then dinners, then nights filled with deep conversations and shared regrets. She didn't plan on loving James, but sometimes when one man takes your heart for another woman, the only way to survive is to give your love to someone else entirely. Ronald started noticing the changes in Rosa, but he told himself it was just the weight of everything they had been through. Maybe she was tired, maybe she was healing, but deep down, in the quiet parts of himself, he tried to ignore. He knew She was drifting, and not aimlessly. She had direction now, a glow that wasn't his doing. That kind of peace doesn't come from solitude. It comes from being seen, from being held in a way he hadn't done in months. He saw James once, by accident. Rosa didn't. No, Ronald was supposed to meet Bryant downtown, but he ended up walking past a little street cafe where laughter caught his ear. He turned his head, and there she was, Rosa, smiling, really smiling. Not the polite kind she gave to coworkers or neighbors. No, this one reached her eyes, and the man across from her, laughing with her like the world didn't matter. That was James. Ronald didn't confront her. He couldn't. He just stood there for a moment, rooted to the spot like some ghost watching a life that used to be his. Jealousy didn't even cover what he felt. It was deeper. A mix of regret, loss, and this sick twist in his stomach that said, "You did this." That night he came home before Rosa did. He waited on the couch, staring at the TV with the volume down. She walked in past 11, surprised to see him up. "You're home early," she said gently. "Yeah." His voice was rough, and she knew why. Women always know. She sat down across from him, the same place where months ago she told him she knew about Ida. "His name's James," she said before he could ask. "I didn't ask." "I know," she sighed. "But I don't want to lie to you." Ronald rubbed his face, elbows on his knees. "Is it serious?" She nodded slowly. "It's not about serious. It's about feeling alive again." He flinched a little. "And I don't make you feel that anymore?" "You used to," she said. "But you gave that version of you to someone else. You looked at her the way you used to look at me, Ronald. And maybe you didn't mean to, but you did. You left me first." He didn't argue. What could he say? That she was wrong. Because she wasn't. The worst part was realizing how blind he had been. He thought he could cheat on the emotional side and still come home to loyalty. That's not how it works. When a woman breaks, it's usually after fighting like hell to hold everything together. Bryant noticed the shift too. During one of their studio sessions, he asked, "You good, man? You look like you haven't slept." Ronald shrugged. "Just life." Bryant, always the realist, gave a short laugh. "That Rosa situation, huh? Don't tell me you thought you could have both." Ronald didn't answer. He hated how right Bryant sounded. Ida was still around, still sending messages, still acting like Rosa was a footnote in some chapter already closed. But Ronald stopped replying. He stood Ida up the night after he saw Rosa with James. No text, no explanation. And when she confronted him days later, he didn't lie. "I made a mistake," he said flatly. "Which one?" she asked, arms crossed, thinking, I could touch something real and not destroy it. Ida rolled her eyes, but she didn't chase him. That was the difference between what they had and what he lost. One was fire for the sake of heat. The other was warmth meant to last. Weeks passed. Rosa still stayed. For now. But the air between them was different. Not angry. Not cold. Just tired. Ronald wanted to fix it, but didn't know where to begin. He thought maybe time would mend things. But time was also giving Rosa space to remember who she was without him. And then one day, Rosa came home and said it. Calm. Final. I've found a place. Ronald blinked. You're leaving? I need to, she said. Not to punish you. Not even just for James. For me. I've been holding on to something that's already gone. He didn't cry. Not in front of her. He just nodded. She walked to the bedroom and started packing. The boxes weren't many. Rosa had always travelled light in life, holding tighter to memories than material things. Ronald watched from the doorway as she folded clothes neatly, every movement quiet, like she was trying not to disturb the air between them any more than she already had. He stood there, hands in his pockets, back against the wall, like a man who didn't quite know how to belong in his own home anymore. "You need help?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. She paused, looked at him. "No, I've got it." It hit him then. How final that sentence sounded. Not just about the packing, about everything. "I never stopped loving you," he said. Not to beg, not to win her back, just because it was true. And some truths deserve to be spoken, even if they come too late. "I know," she replied softly. "But you didn't protect it. You loved me in a way that left me empty." That was the line that stayed with him long after she left. The day Rosa moved out was grey, the kind of weather that made the city feel like a funeral. James showed up with a modest car and a gentle smile, nodding at Ronald like a man trying not to add insult to injury. Ronald didn't say much, just held the door open as they carried out the last box. Before she walked out, Rosa looked around the living room one final time. "We had good years," she said. "We did," Ronald answered, and it was all he could manage. She left quietly. No drama, no breakdown, just a door closing softly behind her. Ronald didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence that now screamed through every room. The house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a museum of a life that had ended without warning. Days turned into weeks. The studio with Bryant kept moving. The deals kept coming, but none of it felt real anymore. Ronald started cancelling meetings. He found himself walking the long way home, stopping at parks they used to visit, sitting on benches just to watch the world go by. He kept hoping she'd call, that maybe she missed him too. But the phone stayed silent. He bumped into Bryant outside a club one night. Loud music, pretty girls, fake laughter. Everything Ronald used to chase before he knew better. Bryant threw an arm around him. "You look like a man who finally understands what he gave up." Ronald didn't smile. "You ever get tired of pretending this is enough?" Bryant raised a brow. "This?" He gestured around at the noise and neon. "This is just noise. You had the music." It was the most honest thing Bryant ever said. Meanwhile, Rosa was building a new rhythm. Her apartment was small, but peaceful. James was patient, never pushing too hard. He never tried to replace what she lost. He just showed up every day, offering presents instead of promises. And slowly, her laughter returned, the kind of laughter that doesn't carry old pain in it. She was learning how to feel safe again, how to be loved without conditions, without second-guessing her worth. One evening, Ronald sat on their old couch, scrolling through photos on his phone. There was one of Rosa, hair messy, laughing with her eyes closed. No makeup, no posing, just her, real and unfiltered. He stared at it for minutes before finally setting the phone down. That's when he realized something brutal. He'd always loved Rosa, but he hadn't fought for her until she was already gone. He'd chosen to gamble on temporary sparks instead of the slow burn that kept him warm for years. And that kind of mistake doesn't come with second chances. He wrote her a letter he never sent. In it, he apologized. Not for cheating, not just for that, but for not cherishing her when it mattered. For choosing ego over love, for forgetting that real love isn't loud or flashy. It's in the small things, like staying, listening, remembering. But he folded it, tucked it in a drawer, and sat in silence. Rosa found herself waking up lighter these days. Not because everything was perfect, because it wasn't, but because she was finally living without the constant ache of being unseen. James never tried to overwrite her past. He knew about Ronald, knew about the pain, and never made her feel guilty for carrying it. He just held space for her, gently. like someone who understood that healing isn't a straight line. It's a slow climb, with moments of slipping back. One Sunday morning, she stood by the window with a cup of tea, watching rain trail down the glass. James was still asleep in the bedroom. Rosa didn't move, just stood there thinking about how far she'd come from that night. Ronald came home smelling like someone else. She remembered the silence in his eyes, the way his guilt didn't come with words. And for the first time in months she felt nothing. Not hate, not regret, just acceptance. That same morning, Ronald sat at a diner he and Rosa used to visit. He stirred his coffee absently, watching couples walk by the window. The waitress refilled his cup without asking, probably used to him by now. She gave him a small smile, but he didn't return it. He'd stopped trying to reach out, not because he didn't want to, because he knew he had no right to. Rosa had moved on, and any message from him would be selfish now. So instead, he tried to become the kind of man who might have deserved her back then. He quit the casual nightlife, distanced himself from Brian, and started working with young musicians who reminded him why he fell in love with sound in the first place. One night, as he sat mixing a track in the studio, Ida called. He stared at the screen for a long minute before declining. She texted right after, "Still ignoring me?" He didn't reply. Instead, he closed the laptop and drove to the lake just outside the city. He used to take Rosa there on her bad days, just to let her breathe. He sat on the hood of his car and looked out at the water, still and endless. He spoke out loud, not expecting anyone to hear. "I hope you're okay. I really do." Back in her apartment, Rosa was helping James assemble a shelf. She laughed when he put a screw in backwards, and he grinned like a man who knew he didn't need to be perfect. He just needed to try. Later that night, they danced in the kitchen to old jazz songs, barefoot and slow. No rhythm needed. Rosa rested her head on his shoulder and closed her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For loving the parts of me that someone else broke." James didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Meanwhile, Ronald started writing music again. Not for money, not for anyone else, just for himself. One of the songs was about Rosa. He never mentioned her name, but her spirit lived in every line. It was raw and beautiful, and unfinished, just like their story. One evening, he sent the track to an indie label under a fake name. He didn't want fame. He just wanted her to know that even though he couldn't say it face to face, he still carried her in the art. A part of him would always belong to the girl who held on until he made it impossible. Weeks later, Rosa heard the song on the radio. She was driving alone, sun pouring in through the windshield. The first chords made her sit up straighter. She knew that melody. She knew that voice. Tears welled up, but they weren't sad. They were soft, forgiving. She didn't call him, didn't need to, because some goodbyes don't need doors slamming or screams in the rain. Some goodbyes are quiet acknowledgements between two hearts that once beat in sync and now beat in peace apart. James noticed the way Rosa went quiet when the song played. Her fingers tightened just a bit around the steering wheel. Her eyes flicked to the sky like she was looking for something that couldn't be found on Earth. He didn't ask her anything. Didn't have to. He reached across the center console and gently placed his hand over hers. She gave him a small, grateful smile, the kind that said more than words ever could. That night, while James was in the shower, Rosa sat on the edge of their bed with her phone in hand. She didn't dial, just stared at Ronald's number, still saved under the name she'd given him years ago, My Constant. Ironic now, she almost laughed. She thought about deleting it, but her thumb didn't move. Not because she wanted him back, but because part of her still needed to know that something from that chapter existed. Even if she'd never opened the book again, across town, Ronald was doing the same thing. Scrolling through photos he hadn't had the heart to delete. He had one of them in bed on a lazy Sunday, hair tangled, eyes sleepy, Rosa half hiding her smile under the blanket. That moment felt like a lifetime ago. He almost messaged her that night, but stopped himself again. He'd written at least a dozen texts and deleted every one. She was someone else's now, and she deserved the peace he hadn't given her. One evening, fate decided to throw them into the same room. It was a mutual friend's birthday. Someone neither of them could say no to. The kind of friend who knew too much and insisted it would be chill, no drama. Ronald arrived first. He stuck close to the back of the room, made casual conversation, sipped his drink, pretended he didn't feel completely out of place. Then Rosa walked in. She was wearing a soft green dress that hugged her in all the quiet ways that made you stop breathing for half a second. Her hair was up. Her smile was calm. James was beside her. Ronald's heart didn't race. It didn't break. It just paused. She saw him too. Of course she did. Her eyes landed on him for a second longer than necessary, and then she looked away like someone acknowledging a shadow she used to know. She didn't come over. Neither did he. They just existed in the same space, breathing the same air, but on different frequencies now. Halfway through the night, they accidentally ended up next to each other at the bar. "Hi," she said. "Hey," he replied. Silence. "You look good," she added. Not as a compliment, but as a courtesy. Like you'd say to someone you once knew intimately, and now knew only from a distance. "So do you," Ronald said, glancing toward where James stood, engaged in a story with some friends. Rosa followed his gaze, then looked back. "He's kind, solid. I can see that." Another silence passed between them. Not awkward, just full. "You wrote that song," she said. Not a question. He nodded. "I knew it was you." She continued. "I listened to it twice. Then I cried. Then I smiled." Ronald looked at her, eyes softer than they'd been in months. "I wasn't trying to win you back. I know. I just needed to say it." She touched his hand for a second. Brief, light, like a leaf touching water. "You did." They didn't linger. She walked away first. He didn't follow. Later that night, Rosa leaned her head on James's shoulder as they sat in the car. He looked at her and asked gently, "You okay?" "Yeah," she said. I finally am." And Ronald, he went home, closed the door, and sat in silence again. But this time it didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like closure. It had been 3 months since that party, and the air had changed for both of them. Rosa had finally unpacked the last box in her new apartment, the one she'd left sealed for far too long, filled with old journals and letters from a life she no longer lived in. She didn't cry as she read them. Instead, she smiled gently, like she was reading the story of someone she used to be, someone who once clung too tightly to a love that no longer held her back, but held her down. She folded the pages carefully and put them in a drawer she rarely opened now. Her life with James was slow and intentional. They made Sunday morning pancakes and argued about which radio station to listen to. They weren't perfect. Sometimes she still froze when he touched her too softly, as if unsure he meant it. Sometimes she compared his reactions to Ronald's, even when she didn't want to. But James never made her feel guilty for it. "Love leaves marks," he once told her. "I don't expect you to pretend you've never been cut. Just don't hide the scars." Meanwhile, Ronald's music was finally starting to get noticed again, but this time under his own terms. He stopped chasing the fast tracks and started producing honest work, raw, stripped-down songs that hit people where it hurt. His small studio turned into a quiet refuge for other broken artists who didn't fit the industry mold. He mentored a young singer named Lana, who reminded him of Rosa in a strange, intangible way. Not in looks, but in spirit. Quiet strength, fire under calm water. One evening, Lana asked him after a long session, "Do you write about her? The woman who broke you?" He didn't answer right away. "She didn't break me," he said at last. "I broke us. She just stopped bleeding for someone who wouldn't stop cutting her." Lana blinked. "That's a lyric," he smirked. Probably. He didn't date. Not seriously. He had flings, mostly short, mostly hollow. But he never let anyone into the place Rosa used to live inside him. He couldn't. Not yet. Sometimes he'd still hear her laugh in his mind when he cooked something badly. Or when a song from their past popped on the radio. He didn't hate it anymore. He just let the memories pass like weather. Some days sunny, some days heavy, but always moving. One Saturday afternoon, Ronald saw her again. It was the farmer's market of all places. She was walking hand in hand with James, a basket on her arm, her smile soft and unhurried. She looked settled. He caught her eyes for a moment across the tables of peaches and sunflowers. She paused, just long enough for them both to remember. Then she nodded. Not a wave, not a smile, just a quiet nod. Like the final punctuation at the end of a long, unfinished poem. Ronald nodded back. He didn't go over, didn't interrupt her piece. That was the difference now. He understood that real love doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it means stepping back so the other person can breathe. Later that evening, Rosa sat with James on the balcony, watching the city fade into dusk. She took a deep breath, leaned her head on his shoulder. "You saw him," James said. "Yeah, you, okay?" She nodded. "I think he is too now." James didn't press. He just kissed her hair and pulled her closer. Ronald sat at his piano that same night and started playing something new. No lyrics yet, just a melody, hopeful, gentle. The kind of sound you only find after the storm has passed. The seasons turned, and so did the pages of their separate lives. What once felt like a gaping wound had quietly become a soft scar. One that neither Rosa nor Ronald needed to hide anymore. A year had passed since Rosa left. She didn't count the days anymore. There was no need to. Her life with James had rooted itself deep and calm, not loud or fiery like before, but strong. They had built something real, something earned. They got a dog, an old rescue named Murphy, with a limp and a tongue too long for his mouth. They laughed every time he snored louder than the TV. They took weekend trips to quiet cabins. And they made traditions out of small things. Wednesday night pasta, Saturday morning records, sleepy Sunday kisses. Rosa had learned to trust again, not just James, but herself, her decisions, her heart. She no longer questioned if she was lovable, or too much, or not enough. She knew now, if you had to beg someone to stay, they were never really with you in the first place. And Ronald changed too. He sold the apartment he and Rosa once shared. It didn't feel like home anymore. It hadn't for a long time. He moved into a smaller place near the studio, filled it with plants he sometimes forgot to water, and books he never finished. He was still learning how to be alone without feeling lonely. Some days were better than others. He had dinner with his mother more, called his sister more, took long drives with no destination, just old playlists and quiet roads. He wasn't looking for love anymore, not in the loud, desperate way he used to. He was learning to love his own company first. And in the spaces where pain used to sit, music lived again. One evening, he got an email from a small production company. They wanted to license his song, the one about Rosa, for a short film. He agreed, but made one request. Her name could never be used. That was private. That was sacred. That same week, Rosa received an anonymous package in the mail. Inside was a vinyl record, no label, just a handwritten note tucked inside. For the girl who taught me what it meant to lose gently. She played it once, alone, sat on the floor with a blanket, and listened as Ronald's voice filled the room. Not as an echo of who he'd been, but as proof of who he had become. The lyrics didn't ask for her back. They didn't beg for anything. They just told the truth. It was beautiful. It was sad. It was closure. She smiled through tears, not because it hurt, but because it didn't anymore. Life moved forward. James proposed in the fall, under a tree with red leaves and a shaky voice. Rosa said yes, without hesitation. Not because he was a rebound, because he was home. Ronald heard about it months later from a mutual friend. He didn't flinch, didn't sigh, just nodded and whispered, "Good." That night he wrote a new song. Not about her, not about loss, about beginning again. In another life, maybe they'd have made it. Maybe if timing was kinder. Maybe if he had chosen her when it counted. But this life, this one gave them exactly what they needed. She gave her love to another man, and Ronald, he gave his heart back to himself. Not every love story is meant to end in forever. Some are meant to teach you how to let go with grace. And sometimes, that's the real kind of love.